Hello and welcome to Good Conversations. We're honored to have with us today Chaz Cartwright, the 25th Superintendent of Glacier National Park. Mr. Cartwright assumed the superintendency in 2008 of one of the true crown jewels of Montana and indeed of the national park system. In fact, it's one of the relatively few parks that's declared an international biosphere reserve. Welcome, Chaz.
Good morning.
Well, there's so many things to talk about regarding the park. Looking forward to having this conversation. Maybe we should just start with what makes it such a special place. You've been there now for 4 years, and I think have probably explored about every nook and cranny up there.
You know, I've seen a lot of the park. I was up on Pagan yesterday looking down at the glacier, and it's nice to get out and reconnect with the actual resource on the ground. You know, I think the first thing that I would mention is that the relationship between the visiting public and the park. Increasingly, what I hear is that it's a personal experience like no other. The resource itself is exceptional, over 1 million acres of one of the most beautiful mountain landscapes in the world. But it's that ability of people to connect at all levels, whether it's just driving over the Going to the Sun Road, getting into the backcountry, or everything in between. That personal connection that seems to be distinctive in my experience in the National Park Service.
And previous to Glacier, what parks did you serve at?
I was at Shenandoah. Prior to that, I was at Dinosaur National Monument, Devil's Tower National Monument, Knife River Indian Villages National Historic Site, and Hovenweep National Monument. So this is my 6th superintendency. I see. And my last.
And your last.
Well, this is where I want to be.
Yeah. Well, we're lucky to have you here. And what sets Glacier apart from those other parks you've served at?
You know, with the starting point of it being the 10th National Park, a World Heritage Site, the world's first international peace park, I'd say that those distinctions, those are not just idle designations, those are designations that have real meaning. And really what they connote is that it's a park for the world. It's that combination of natural and cultural resources that makes it of worldwide significance.
Yeah. And ecologically, what makes this, why would this get that biosphere designation? What are some of the assets or attributes of the park?
You know, an intact system with Glacier at its heart, but a larger crown of the continent system of protected acreage, a complete assemblage of every mammal and charismatic animals like grizzlies, wolverines, and everything else you can think of. An intact system where you can really feel the wildness. I think that wildness is probably what sets apart Glacier apart from most any other park in the system, especially in the lower 48.
Yeah, and that's interesting because at the same time that there's that complete wildness, the presence of every major predator and so on, it's also very accessible. I mean, there's a road right over the heart of it, so people can get right into it.
You know, that is a distinctive aspect because it not only gets you a great view as you drive over the road, but it is the portal of access to Glacier. And in fact, it's an area that we're going to concentrate some planning efforts in the coming year. How do we want to manage that corridor? But yes, it's similar to my last park, Shenandoah, where there's a road right over the top or on top of the mountain that is the portal of access into the park.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to some of those issues in a moment here. That'll be good to talk about. But just to touch on, I guess a couple of years ago now, Glacier celebrated its centennial. And that prompts some reflection on the park's history. I mean, today it's unanimously loved by Americans and Montanans. That wasn't so when it was first established, was it?
No, it was a small fraction of people that were supportive, including local people. And if you looked at it now, I have never been in a park where the park is so loved, not just by the local public, who are a very important constituency, but by a national and international constituency. But when we met on the 100th anniversary, and that day of bringing people together to celebrate that, I've never been at an event that had the feeling that it did of kind of reflecting back on the past and what that first 100 years is like, but really looking forward to how can we make sure this is a great place 50, 100 years or more. And that's really the question. It's great to love the place, but how can we care for it? Because it's a public resource. I hear people a lot refer to it as my park, and I try to change that into our park or your park, because there's that stewardship responsibility that's what those events are so good for, is to reflect on the past and well into the future.
Yeah, it can get loved to death, places like this.
You know, in the Park Service, we try to do both. It's a mandate to preserve and protect, but it's also a mandate to provide a quality visitor experience. And it's not one over the other. Now, granted, if you don't have an intact resource, then it's hard to provide that quality visitor experience. But the service's organic act and mission is about doing both. And yeah, we just got out of one of the busiest years we've ever had. And to say that it gets a little bit busy on the mountain would be an understatement. We have some issues with trying to do both, but I think we're doing a good job. We need to make some adjustments along the way to ensure that we stay on track.
Yeah. Well, again, we'll hopefully get into a couple of those here as we continue our conversation. I wanted to back up for a second, though, and also reflect on the relationship of Indian people in the region to the park. For them, it's always been a special place, hasn't it?
It's huge. It's one of my jobs in the mid-career was Devil's Tower, and it was a park that had a relationship with 24 tribes. Considered a sacred site. And I would think that if you're looking at tribal relations at Glacier, whether it's Blackfeet or the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribe, it's homeland. And it's a connection with that landscape that's, thousands of years. And so that connection that the park has, not just me, but our staff has. What kind of hiring programs do we have for American Indian peoples? What kind of overall relationship do we have with both the Blackfeet and the Confederated Salish Kootenai tribe? It's a critical relationship. We can't be successful in the park if we're not working on that relationship.
So I imagine it's been one of the focuses of your foci of your superintendency then, developing those relationships.
I think it is with any superintendent. It's relationships are at the heart of what we do. And it's challenging work, but it's work that really helps connect people to the place. You don't want to lose that connection.
Yeah. Was it just last year the permanent exhibit open in St. Mary's on Native Americans in the park? Can you offer a remark or two for our viewers about that?
In my experience in the Park Service, typically we would interact with the tribe, consult with the tribe, but rather than have the tribe develop exhibits about their interaction with the landscape, we'd say, what do you think about this? And in this case, we said, what do you want? You're in the driver's seat. And it took us Took us a while to pull things together, but these are exhibits that were really at their heart designed by the tribes. And what better people to have in charge of telling their own story. So I think that's what made things a little bit different. It was not what do you think about these exhibits, but what do you want, what's important, and it tells the stories, I think, very well in their own voice. A success story.
Yeah. So if folks haven't been up there to see it yet, they should go.
They should go, and I think the fact that it's an interactive kind of experience, I think that they'll find it to be quite the learning experience and very insightful.
And just inside the entrance at St. Mary's.
Just at St. Mary's, and these are exhibits that were brought to you by your fee dollars. So very positive thing that we can do great things for the tribes, for the public in general, with our fee dollars.
Great. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and touch a little bit more on some of these issues and challenges facing the park. What do you put first and foremost among the things that you're having to wrestle with?
Well, you know, we've been wrestling with this for quite some time, but climate change is a huge issue. And how we deal with that issue internally, what kind of standard we set in terms of how we operate the park. Then you look at the actual resources, and you know, we're fully engaged in dealing with how do we deal with this loss of glaciers, reduction in water, change in vegetation patterns, and how does that impact, let's start with the wildlife that we're so well known for. Where is it important to make some adjustments in terms of trying to preserve and protect? Bull trout, for instance. What's acceptable to do in terms of trying to insert ourselves in the process and ensure their long-term protection? I think those kind of questions, and really at its heart, is we're still, not just as a park, but as a service, attempting to engage the public more fully in that discussion. Climate change has even become quite a lightning rod. People hear those two words and it can get them off track of really talking about landscape level changes. We're trying to figure out what works with engaging the public, because no one discounts the loss of glaciers. No one is arguing that they're probably going to be gone in the next 10 to 20 years. People can see the reduction in water that's coming off the mountain. People can see changing vegetation patterns, increased issues with insects and disease, problems in the forest. And so engaging people on what's obvious, and you know, it's just, if we don't engage the public, we don't want to be making decisions, those of us that are lucky enough to work in the park, we don't want to be making decisions based just on what we think is right. This is, again, a public resource, and we've got to get people behind those kinds of things that we do insert ourselves and try to impact in a positive way.
Well, this is such a difficult and challenging subject, and I want to continue the conversation right after our break. To our viewers, please don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And welcome back. We're continuing our conversation today with Chaz Cartwright, Superintendent of Glacier National Park. And Chaz, thanks again for taking the time to be with us.
It's great being here, Tom.
Well, just before the break, you were beginning to discuss a little bit about the immense challenge of the climate change issue. And some places in the country, many places in the United States, I guess, there's a lot of contention over whether it's happening, what the cause is. But on the ground in Glacier National Park, the changes are overwhelmingly documented, aren't they?
They are. They are. We have a USGS, U.S. Geological Survey contingent of scientists that are located in the park that have been tracking things and doing baseline work and monitoring work for a long time. So it's without dispute that things are changing on that landscape, and they're changing drastically.
And in some ways, this is a unique challenge for Glacier, isn't it? Not only in terms of its scale, but also in terms of the park itself being unable to control it. It's a global issue.
It is a global issue, and again, the question of where is it appropriate to interact, we have limited resources, limited time to deal with issues. Where is there going to be bang for our buck, that it's worth that intervention and input of money, of people, in trying to impact that change? Because the change is happening so fast that we don't want to waste time. We want to focus it on what's really going to give us some results.
Yeah. And before the break, you'd mentioned a number, a date that I want to make sure didn't fly by our viewers. They're actually predicting that the glaciers that give the park its name will be gone in the not too distant future.
That is correct. That is correct. And you can see the change. I've been on the landscape for 4 years. You can see the change almost year by year if you get out and see things. And certainly our scientists that are measuring things, you know, it is without dispute.
Yeah. And for those who may not understand, what's the difference between a glacier and a snowfield?
A glacier has enough size and mass that it still incrementally moves. And
so in essence, a river of ice.
It is a river of ice.
And it has to, I think by the definitions, it has to be so many acres in size to continue.
25 acres.
25 acres. So once it gets below that, it's not really considered a glacier anymore.
It's not.
And also, the other thing I wanted you to help explain to our viewers is the difference between climate and weather. Because there, a couple of years ago, or the winter before this last one, we had huge snowfall. And it was a record late opening of Going to the Sun Road in 2011.
I remember it well. And, you know, it would take literally hundreds of years like we had in 2011 to even begin to stem the loss, much less start rebuilding glaciers. So huge, huge difference. And you know, looking at things really in terms of scale, this is large scale stuff. Once a glacier becomes a certain size, the loss of glaciers once they get really small is so fast that, you know, I would be surprised if 20, 30 years from now we have much more than remnant snowfields out on the landscape.
The park formerly known as Glacier.
You know, still a park that was shaped by glaciers, so that won't ever change.
Yeah. So early in our discussion today, you were mentioning some of the things that make Glacier such a special place and give it the international recognition it has, and a large part of that is the intact ecosystem. In fact, that's also tied to its great cultural importance for Indian people. Let's maybe touch on a couple of the species, if we could, that are really standing in the crosshairs of climate change, that are most vulnerable to these changes. You'd mentioned bull trout.
You know, we are doing quite a bit of work with bull trout. We have a few lakes in the park that either don't have lake trout in it or don't have a predominance of lake trout, where we feel like we have a chance of preserving and protecting the bull trout. And those kinds of projects that we're considering include trying to control the lake trout, and actually we are maintaining one of our, we call them abutments. They're rock structures so that lake trout can't get up into those systems, and even considering, in the process of considering building new little rock dams to try to keep lake trout out. Now that's occurring in the middle of recommended wilderness, so it's not without controversy. But you know, we put a lot of thought into this because this is a long-term commitment to continue to do that work. So it's not just building the dams, but it's continuing to do the monitoring work, the control work. But I think we have a fighting chance.
Yeah. So, I mean, I imagine all these species that are at risk from climate change, it's not as if that's the only threat to them. Invasive species is also, you know, lake trout are non-native species. They
are a non-native species. And invasive species really would make the top of my list of threats. And it goes beyond lake trout. The issue related to aquatic invasive species, quagga mussels, zebra mussels, we have implemented a pretty comprehensive program in the park for checking all boats, checking even motorless watercraft. And this is not just a park issue, but it's a statewide, countrywide, worldwide issue. And my concern at this point in time is that I don't think the public generally understands what the nature of this threat is. We need to engage more on this topic because it's huge. Think about a park that is known for water, and think about quagga or zebra mussels getting into that system.
Well, let's just back up a second, if you could, and just explain to those who may not be familiar with quagga and zebra mussels. What are these critters? You and I both are serving on the Flathead Basin Commission. It's been a big concern of the commission as well.
You know, it's been one of the primary focuses. We're not out of talking about the transboundary issue, which hopefully we'll get to in this conversation. But we are now spending most of our time focusing on what can we do to facilitate implementation of a program statewide that will control these things, that will keep them out of our waters. And we've got to put full energy into this. If we don't, my concern is that we're waiting for them to hit the state.
Okay, so these are non-native mussels. They're how big are they? What's the threat? Why are they?
Well, they're microscopic when they start out, and you can only measure it, you know, with some hard science. But they get big, and they take over the system, and the system, in my sense, virtually dies. I guess that'd be the explanation I would give.
They can just coat shorelines, boats, docks? They
can.
Okay. And they get transported on boats primarily?
That would be the primary means of communication or entry into the system, but there's other ways that they can enter the system. We had what was kind of seemingly a side issue when fires start burning and we have these planes that land on lakes and scoop up water. Have they been inspected?
Yeah.
You know, if we're really looking at keeping these things out, we have to look at any means of them entering the system.
Yeah. And so you were talking about these inspection points. Explain that, what's done, what the hope is with those.
We have inspection stations as you enter the park, and our goal is to inspect every single boat, especially motorless or even non-motorized watercraft, so that there's absolutely no chance of introducing these mussels into the system.
Yeah. I mean, they're so tiny though. I mean, it's basically the best hope. Yeah, I mean,
it is the best hope, but we're doing other things like doing water quality testing and monitoring, because we can identify them at the microscopic stage.
Yeah. Well, you and I both hope that these efforts succeed, because, as you say, it's an enormous threat.
You know, Tom, I think the biggest debate now is whose responsibility is it? I mean, certainly at Glacier, we have primary responsibility in the park. The overall program in the state is run by the state. There's local responsibilities, but really it's a citizen's responsibility to be a part of increasing awareness and understanding about what the nature of the threat is. So my concern is that we sometimes get into this fight on who's responsible, when the reality is the way we'll keep them out is that everybody has a role to play.
All right, that's a good message for our viewers to absorb. Spread the word.
Spread the word.
Be responsible yourself about these things. Before we finish up, we only have a couple minutes left. This goes by so fast, but some of the other species that also I wanted you to share a word with, if you could. Whitebark pine, a very important tree that occurs right at the tree line. Tell us about that and its condition, if you could.
You know, it's an amazing resource, a resource that grizzly bears and other animals have come to depend on. Most people have heard the story of what's happened at Yellowstone with whitebark pine being the primary resource. Thankfully, we are well known for our berries, so we're providing quite an amazing food source for the grizzly bears, but we are working on trying to sustain what's out there and even bring some back. Now, that's a daunting task in the face of climate change, but that's another thing where I think we feel our efforts are worthwhile. But those changes in vegetation patterns and even in existence of species, that's drastic, it's notable, and it impacts and reverberates throughout the system.
And the other threat to whitebark pine besides climate change has been a blight. That's great. Yeah. Okay.
Very difficult to deal with.
Very difficult to deal with. Well, so many more things to talk about, and I'm pleased to tell our viewers that you'll join us for another half hour, which will...
I'll look forward to it.
I'll look forward to it too. And to our viewers, we hope you'll look forward to it. Please join us next time as we continue conversation with Superintendent Chaz Cartwright of Glacier National Park about some of the major issues, challenges, and opportunities facing the park in coming years. Thanks for watching. So long.